This is Kentucky Afield Radio. This is Ron Rohde, Kentucky Afield's first host back in 1953. Now, I'm proud to present Charlie Baglin.
On this special edition of Kentucky Afield, we go inside outdoors quite literally. A look at the side of Christmas that involves nature. Why reindeer? Why lights on a tree? Why 12 days? Why fruitcake? We have two guests with a big red sack of answers slung over their back on just how Mother Nature came to have such a starring role in this grandest of holidays, the wildlife and folk life of Christmas. Next on Kentucky Afield Radio.
We don't have reindeer in Kentucky. We have something better. Whitetails. Kentucky is the #1 destination for deer hunting in the nation, making the Kentucky Fish and Wildlife gift certificate a great idea. Redeemable for hunting licenses, deer tags, and more. Load, buy, and print online. Have the Jolly Reindeer drop off the Kentucky Fish and Wildlife gift certificate for anyone on your list with Great Kentucky Deer Hunting on theirs. Find it at fw.ky.gov.
Once there were 3 wise men. They were the travelers of their day. They traveled far and at night, using only the stars to guide their way. They never got a ticket or caused crashes. It was a miracle. But come to find out, they were never really in the dark at all. It's an age-old story that still applies when you give the gift of driving wise. A holiday wish for safe travels from your Kentucky Office of Highway Safety. Kentucky Afield Radio, my name is Charlie Baglin, and Merry Christmas to you, just days away now. Everywhere you turn on the radio or on the TV, there's another Christmas special playing. This is one more, but just like we have always done with Easter or Halloween, we talk about how wildlife and nature play into our celebrations. Deer, holly, ivy, the Christmas tree, snow. Christmas customs have evolved over time. Cultures, our ancestry, our heritage, our hunting, our gardening, living off the land. They have all played into how we experience this holiday. In the studio to help unwrap some of these details of behind the scenes with Christmas are Laurie Davison and Brent Bjorkman. And Laurie, tell me a bit about your position with the Salado Wildlife Education Center.
I am the manager of the Salado Wildlife Education Center in Frankfort, which is essentially a zoo that houses a variety of Kentucky native wildlife. And really cool place.
You have a lot of school kids every year, like the hundreds of thousands.
Tons of school kids, yes.
So education is the name of the game there at Salado.
Absolutely.
And Brent Bjorkman at Western Kentucky University. Tell me a little bit about your position with the Kentucky Folklife program.
The Kentucky Folklife program has as its mission to document, present, and also conserve the traditional arts, traditional culture, and heritage of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. So we do things like create radio programs about the tradition from the documentation that we do with various groups and people and communities throughout the state. Could be about music, could be about art, could be about occupations that are traditional that people do. So it's really to celebrate and hold up these things, these pieces of traditional culture that aren't really talked about, let's say like in the history books and that sort of thing. It's really based in community, stories from community. A lot of word of mouth. Absolutely, it is word of mouth. That's right. You are with the name Bjorkman. I'm going to spell that, Bjorkman. Yes. You were telling me before the show that means birch, as in wood or tree? Bjork means birch, yes, like the tree. And I was thinking, wow, that's apropos here that we're on a fish and wildlife type show. But Bjorkman, as folks around here would say, you're probably from out of town. Yes, right. You're not from around here. Where are you from? Actually, I grew up in Minnesota, in the north upper Midwest. And, Laurie, you're from South Carolina. Yes. That's a pretty good place to start talking about Christmas traditions, because I'm curious, for as many things as there are alike about Christmas wherever you go, at least in the United States, you have the Christ child story, Mary and Joseph. You have the Santa Claus and the candy canes, the Christmas tree, and all that story. As much as these stories persist across the nation, there are differences
regionally. Do either one of you notice differences in the way Christmas is celebrated in Kentucky versus where you all grew up?
I would say for myself it's very similar, but I also, even though I grew up in South Carolina, my parents are Yankees, so we've got a mix of stuff that my family did, but our neighbors growing up had very distinct Southern traditions. Like one of the meals that would show up at the feast pretty regularly was shrimp and grits. So
shrimp and grits.
Not what you think of as your traditional Christmas feast, but it's awful good.
Well, I know this one thing about northern South Carolina, what they call the upstate.
Yes.
Not much snow there.
No.
You get a little bit of snow in Kentucky, not always on Christmas, unfortunately.
No, but it's one of the reasons I moved to Kentucky. I wanted more snow.
You wanted more snow.
Yes.
Now, Brent, where you are from,
that's right.
A white Christmas, I'm going to say, is commonplace.
Oh, yeah, it's white there right now. I'm almost positive. But, yeah, absolutely. It was always most often a white Christmas. I come from, as my name will tell you, I would imagine if you know, a Scandinavian, Lutheran Scandinavian. So, church was very important. I mentioned, I think last week when we talked, Christmas really centers around a lot, coming together and the food traditions. And, that's what Laurie alluded to, the shrimp and grits. And all these things are very ethnically and regionally based, too. Think about shrimp and grits, and, you're closer to the coast and closer to southern foodways grits, where I grew up in a Scandinavian household where there was a lot of things like Swedish meatballs, but also this dried cod that's called lutefisk that was reconstituted, and it was a little bit maybe like gefilte fish almost, something that a lot of people do not enjoy, but the nostalgia for foodways, even if people, it resonates with you, and just the idea that it's an object that talks about our own heritage, it's on the table. And I think that's one of the things as a folklorist that, how do you tell people? They say, well, do I have folklore? Well, everybody has folklore, and one way during the seasons to really think about what is folklore is, think about it if something on your Christmas table or part of your celebrating at the home site in the community, what if it was missing? What if it wasn't there that year and you would be yearning and desiring for that? It could be maybe the Christmas tree moved from downstairs to upstairs, and that's never been done before. Or you get married, and in the instance of myself, my wife's people are from Alabama, and they open their Christmas presents on Christmas Day. Well, in my mind, it was everyone opens them on the 24th, and there's a few Santa presents on the 25th. They do it all on the morning. So, folklore is dynamic. We had to negotiate those things in our new household. So I think that's part of what people need to know, that what they do, and it's very intimate and almost very family-centered, and those are the precious things that we take away from life, from community, but also from this time of year.
I'm thinking Christmas, when you open presents, when you have your big family meal, will almost vary from house to house to house on your street. Almost. I grew up, and I think it was because my mother wanted to sleep in. We went to the Catholic Church, and at midnight, we would come in, and it was 1 in the morning, and we did this midnight mass, and she would say, Santa Claus came while you were away, and I was just a little kid, and I bought it, and we would be up till 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. And then to sleep in all the rest of the day, and she didn't have to worry about getting up early, bringing out presents from under the bed.
Your mother's a smart woman.
That's exactly right.
We talk about, in Kentucky, a down-home country Christmas. I think I have heard Kenny Rogers sing a song by that title. Brent, what is a down-home Kentucky Christmas? Down-home really country Christmas is really, it kind of goes back to this nostalgia thing. It's about homecoming, coming back down home. And if you think about it as a direction, it's very similar to the folks that, for financial reasons had to do that exodus to the north to maybe work in Detroit or Columbus or places of that nature to, maybe leave Appalachia or maybe just leave the South for the jobs. And I think that's one of the reasons, like, well, where are you going? I'm going down home for Christmas. It's a down home Christmas. We're going to finally get together. We rarely get back there because our lives are so busy with our new communities up north. And when you get back and you get back with the kinfolk and relatives, and you're going to enjoy this particular time. So I think it's an iconic way of saying that. That's what I think. the term Norman Rockwell Christmas. Norman Rockwell was a famous painter, and though he is deceased now, we still see his work. If I can use the quote, a Norman Rockwell Christmas. I hope people will know what that means. It's sort of the Christmas that, if there could be a Christmas in your mind, if you could paint a picture of Christmas, this is what it would look like.
It's the Christmas I have aimed for in my traditions, actually. That's my Christmas in my mind.
So does it exist in Kentucky? Or is it purely a mental picture? We'll talk about it when we come back. I'm Charlie Baglin. You're listening to Kentucky Afield Radio. We are back in segment 2. My name is Charlie Baglin on Kentucky Afield Radio. The topic this week is Christmas, of course. Our program is talking about the picture-perfect Christmas and how nature is part of that. Laurie Davison from the Salado Wildlife Education Center and from his office in Bowling Green at Western Kentucky University, Brent Bjorkman with the Kentucky Folklife program. Snow. We see kids that play in the yard, horse-drawn sleighs. We see a table inside a nice home in the country that is full of food and people are coming to sit down and eat. Christmas tree in the corner. Does this exist as much as we think it does in Kentucky? Because the snowfall in Kentucky really doesn't provide for it. We need to have Christmas in January to have a better shot at this. The Norman Rockwell Christmas. What states, where do you have to go to find this on a consistent basis?
What state do you have to go? I think you have to go to the state of your mind in one sense, but I think the Norman Rockwell piece has really been pushed forward, I think, really by a lot of American advertising as well. I mean, It's in everything we see, from the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and you remember the Norelco commercials where he was floating and Earl Ives and the snowman. That's kind of where you're coming from, Charlie. It's always this white, pastoral, or there's a cozy, snug home, and you look in the window and there's a table full of food. And it's part of the bounty, too, in all cultures during the harvest time, and that's when this season does fall, when all the crops are in and we finally do have time. But I think this cold weather climate really has to do with these things being created by Madison Avenue and the advertising people who've pushed it along very successfully for probably as long as we've been a nation.
And Coca-Cola is the favorite beverage of Santa Claus.
Absolutely, and it's a very southern beverage, so.
Yeah, I always, the Norman Rockwell stuff, I go to my grandparents' house because Christmas at their house, and it was a combination. The other iconic Christmas is Currier and Ives. And my grandparents lived in Vermont, and that scene in Norman Rockwell's painting of the family gathered around the table and the beautiful turkey and the peas and everything, that was the Christmas dinners. That's what we did at my grandparents' house if we visited there for Christmas, and it was very much exactly like that.
We've been talking a lot about the things we see, the Christmas tree, the snow, the greenery, the wreath on the door. These are all parts of nature, and as the show progresses, I want to get in and talk about these things, mistletoe, holly, ivy. And we'll do that, but I think it's worth a moment to talk about the origin, and I know that you all know because I kind of don't. The origin of Christmas. Now, I know the story says celebrating the birth of Jesus Christ. Mr. Bjorkman, the origin of the holiday of Christmas, it didn't start out as a religious holiday, did it?
Beginning of the 1600s, it kind of goes back to what we talked about, folklore being very dynamic and things changing over time. And this went in when as I understand it, Pope Gregory was trying to convert some of the pagan religions, maybe of the northern part of Europe, and they were really celebrating around the equinox.
First day of winter.
Absolutely. So, they had prayers and giving reverence to the living culture, and part of that was the trees of the area, the coniferous trees, which did become the Christmas. So he tried to incorporate and give them a little bit of leeway, saying, okay, well, let's work around this and try to get this idea of Christianity in, but let's not do it by overpowering them. So it was kind of a movement over time, and then eventually this became, as Christianity took over a lot of this idea of when Christmas became what it is today, it really goes back to change over time and people's traditions doing that.
I'll never forget my mother said, Christmas comes at the wrong time of the year. It's cold and people are out and they're doing this and that and they're traveling and there's snow. But she says, I think it should come in summer. But I got to thinking, in New Zealand and Australia and South Africa, it does come in summer.
It does, in the middle of summer.
I have not been there for the Christmas holiday in the Southern Hemisphere. Never have. And I don't know, I would not know how to celebrate Christmas without snow. The picture just isn't there. I can't see it in a palm tree. Have either of you seen Christmas in the summer?
I was in Ethiopia adopting my children on Christmas, and it was definitely not snowing or cold there.
That's equator. That's on the
It was on the equator, so yeah, definitely not, although it did get chilly during the rainy season, but one of the days that we were there, the agency sent us all out to this neat little resort, I guess. They had this skinny guy wearing bright green, lime green running shoes, dressed as Santa Claus, and he was going around handing out little gifts, which were mostly little bags of candy and stuff like that. But I thought it was funny that Santa Claus had also made it to Ethiopia. But they have their own Christmas traditions as well. Ethiopia has the oldest Christian church there.
There's a Coptic Christian with that.
That's right, yeah. They have a tradition around Christmas that looks nothing like ours. It's very much religious, and the outfits that people wear, it's all white. Everybody goes to church wearing white robes and things like that. But I think there's a lot of fasting involved.
You will see differences in Christmas every country you go to.
Christmas in the summer, maybe I could stretch it to holiday. I was when I was in Alaska working as a seasonal worker there working in tourism. The National Park Service. People are seasonal workers, and they have this real bond that they have, much like a family. Of course, you spent day and night with these people during a tourist season. So they actually have a thing that's quite universal, not just in Alaska, but in a lot of the parks, is Christmas in July or Christmas in August. And they celebrate by giving each other gifts and making a big deal of it sometimes with the campers and the tourists that are around them at that particular time. Santa Claus is usually one of the veteran rangers, that sort of thing. So we do have this idea of Christmas being something that we really cherish, and we want to celebrate it with those we are intimate with and love.
Nature is a big part of Christmas. Nature is a big part of Halloween. We have a rabbit on Easter. We have flowers coming out our ears on Mother's Day. I don't know if there's nature a part of Valentine's Day, but Groundhog
flowers Day. Again. Oh, Groundhog Day.
Groundhog Day is another holiday that centers around wildlife, and there is one other, Arbor Day. Maybe there are more. But Christmas certainly has nature involved in it, and this is Kentucky Afield Radio. So we should look at the nature that we use as we celebrate Christmas in Kentucky. And we can begin with the Christmas tree. What native Christmas trees are there growing in Kentucky? Laurie, do you know?
Well, the red cedar or juniper, which is what we usually used in my family. We'd go out and cut a cedar tree. There are people that use pine trees as well. We've got Virginia pines and white pines, although they're not great at holding ornaments.
Pitch pine. There's also pitch pine in this state.
Yes. Yeah.
Have you heard of hemlock trees being used as a Christmas tree?
I have heard of that, which is kind of cool, because they look a lot like a fir tree. I would imagine they're just as good as a fir to hold ornaments, I've never actually used one.
The idea of lights on a Christmas tree, where'd that come from? And the story I heard was, if you go outside at night in a clear night, you can look through the branches and the pine needles and you can see the stars, and that sort of mimics what a Christmas tree light is. That at all close to the truth that either one of you know?
The one I've heard has to do with St. Lucia.
Yeah, St. Lucia was an Italian saint, but funny enough, she was embraced by Swedish culture. So
Okay.
It is a time and she wears a crown of lights around her head.
And they used to have parades. This was just previous to Christmas was St. Lucia Day.
That's right.
And her name, actually, the root of her name is Light, Lux.
That's right.
And they would have parades, and people would carry torches, and they would declare a woman in the village or the town to be St. Lucia for the day, and they would do this parade she'd be surrounded by people carrying torches and light. So that, to me, is a possible link to the Christmas lights.
Putting candles on a Christmas tree, on a pine tree, with all the is it turpentine that's in
pitch and
that
just seems like a fire hazard waiting to happen.
Yep, it is.
And I'm sure it had to be. But I assume that you found a better way to put light on a tree and not use a candle and burn down your home.
Right.
Does that have any validity?
Yes.
Absolutely. It became the Christmas tree in homes as kind of a universal. Kind of came about with Queen Victoria when she married Prince Albert, who was a German, and it was a German that putting candles on a tree was a very a German tradition that they brought into London at that time. And then again, I think a PR mechanism went off, and people saw this and learned about this. So it became this thing that was embraced by Anglo culture, and then, of course, migrated here to the United States, where we embrace it as well. But I really like both of those stories, St. Lucia, but also probably that initial story, seeing the lights of stars through a grove of trees, too. And also just this idea of light, it's going to restore us and keep us warm during these days that could be lonely if we didn't have that. All of those are very valid and part of any particular person's belief system.
Wildlife and folk life, sides of the holidays that we don't always see in the spotlight, but they are today. In the next segment, we will talk about uses for that Christmas tree after all the decorations have been taken off. Stay with us. This is Kentucky Afield Radio. This is Kentucky Afield Radio. My name is Charlie Baglin, and I want to promote the show that's coming up next week, the show after Christmas. We will be talking about Eagle Watch Weekends. They are events put on by the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife and the Kentucky Department of Parks. They're scheduled for January and early February, taking place on Lake Barkley and Kentucky Lake and the land between the lakes. Tours by land, tours by covered boat to see these eagles in their natural habitat. But I mention it now because they make really good gifts. Visit the Kentucky State Parks website for Eagle Watch Weekends, parks.ky.gov. Give the gift and tune in next week to learn more. Time now, though, for our fishing report. Charlie Baglin in on Kentucky Afield Radio. One gift you didn't think you were going to get for Christmas is better fishing. I'll tell you how. It's a service of your leftover Christmas tree. Details after the break.
Honey, what'd you get your brother?
The Fish and Wildlife gift certificate.
What about Dad?
The Kentucky Fish and Wildlife gift certificate.
This holiday season, all the hunting and fishing for gifts just got easier. Let your outdoorsmen pick the fishing or hunting license they need for all their fun afield in the new year. Load, buy, and print online the Kentucky Fish and Wildlife gift certificate for anyone on your list with the great outdoors on theirs. Online at fw.ky.gov. This is Kentucky Afield Radio. My name is Charlie Baglin. We are talking about the wildlife and folk life sides of Christmas. Laurie Davison from the Salado Wildlife Education Center is my guest, along with Brent Bjorkman from Western Kentucky University, the Folklife program in Bowling Green. Christmas trees are wonderful things before, during, and after Christmas. Alternate uses for these trees other than just putting them on the curb.
Yes, absolutely. And here at Fish and Wildlife, one of the big uses for Christmas trees after Christmas is fish shelter, fish habitat. We actually will send out press releases to the newspaper and say, bring us your Christmas trees. And when I say we, I don't mean bring them to the Salado Center. Our fisheries division is who handles this.
But this is scattered all across the state.
It is, yes.
Fish habitat, how's that work?
They basically weigh them down. They take the trees and, one or more trees, depending on how big they are, and weigh them down with cinder blocks or something like that and sink them into lakes. and they provide cover for smaller fish to get away from the big ones that are going to eat them, and makes them last a little longer. Fish are pretty rabidly hungry, it seems like to me. I watch them in the aquariums at work, and a bass will go through a bunch of minnows in no time flat. If you have a place for them to hide, it stretches that food source out a bit longer. It maintains a healthier ecosystem when you've got all shapes and sizes of fish in there.
So this is a good idea for your live tree, your real tree, after the holidays.
Yes. Look
around in the newspaper or call the Department of Fish and Wildlife and say, hey, are you doing a collection of these anywhere in the state, wherever you happen to live? And they'll say yay or nay. And another term for this, as we said, fish habitat, fish attractors. Mm-hmm. You'll hear that in the fishing report. Look for the fish attractors. We will give you a map of where these fish attractors are, where they put them. And that's going to be a really good place to go to drop your bait.
Right. And that's because the big fish are hanging out around these Christmas trees where all the minnows are. It's a good place for a bunch of fish to congregate. There's going to be all sorts of variety there.
If that option isn't available, can they be mulched? What else? Firewood?
Sure, mulched. What I do with my Christmas tree, and I live in suburbia, is I drag it to the edge of the yard and I leave it there. And it provides cover for birds that are ground feeders or squirrels and chipmunks or whatever may be out there that needs cover.
That is a smart. Just throw it in the corner in the backyard.
Yeah. And
maybe have 2, 3, 4 of these things. You just pile them up.
Absolutely. Brush piles are one of the best forms of habitat you can put in, and it's completely inexpensive. You just drag stuff together and pile it up.
Rabbits will use those, small birds.
Absolutely. All sorts of wildlife uses them.
And they'll use them year-round, not just immediately after.
Sure. In spring, it's going to be a great place for nesting or denning for raising your young.
Talking about your yard, what can you do to make Christmas more decorative just with things you will find laying around your yard? Pine cones, for example.
Oh, pine cones are great for cheap and easy bird feeders. It's a fun thing to do with kids. You take a pine cone and some chunky peanut butter, and you can add stuff to it like raisins and things like that, maybe some nuts, crunched up nuts and things, and just fill up the space in between all the little pieces of pine cone and take it outside and hang it on a tree, and birds love it.
Doesn't have to be a pine tree. It doesn't have to be the tree it came off of.
That's right.
It's hanging on any tree, and birds will go crazy. A feast.
And it's also fun, and this is another fun thing to do with kids, especially because they don't think in these terms unless you direct them that way sometimes. All sorts of things that you'll find out in your backyard or in the woods, if you think about them right, make pretty darn good Christmas ornaments. And an example would be trumpet vine pods. I had a friend that did this, and the first time I thought, what a great idea. I wish I'd thought of that. She took trumpet vine pods and spray painted them different shiny colors. Basically, those were her ornaments on the tree, and they were way cool.
Holly. Is holly a bush, or is holly a shrub, or is it a tree? I have holly bushes in my house. Is it all three?
There are a bunch of different types of holly, and the holly lends itself well to being trimmed back, so you can make a holly be a shrub. There are the native hollies, the deciduous holly and the winterberry holly are big producers of red fruits. They're awful pretty to have in your yard.
Holly with those red berries. Mm-hmm. Now, those red berries are bird food.
They're bird food, and they're very pretty as far as decoration goes as well. But, yeah, birds love them.
In my neighborhood, we had this wonderful, it was a very mature, and it was a tree. It was a holly tree. And when I moved in, I found out the neighborhood tradition, as somebody knocked on my door and said, the previous owner have always let us come and take some of your branches so we can make our wreaths and things for our door. What am I going to say? Yeah, that sounds fine.
You have to let them.
That's right. So, yeah, I love the holly. Is there something between the male and the female? I was learning a little bit, and I can't quite remember.
Yeah, there are male and female trees. A lot of trees have the male and female parts all on the same tree.
Right.
But among hollies and some other species of trees out there, you have to have one of each in order to get the berries. And hollies are definitely one of those.
One of the biggest and most important piece of greenery to adorn the Christmas season, especially to lonely men. Mistletoe. Now, that is a native plant right here in Kentucky.
Yes.
Comment, if you will.
It is, and it's a fascinating plant.
There is one species of mistletoe in this state.
Yes, there is. The mistletoe is a parasitic plant. It grows up in trees. This time of year, when the leaves have dropped off all the deciduous trees, you'll see these big clumps of greenery, look like maybe basketball size in some cases, and that's generally mistletoe. And it lives off of the sap of the tree that it grows on. And if there's enough of it on there, it will actually disrupt and kill the tree over time.
So you can see this stuff, like in the winter. Go outside now, look up in trees that have dropped all their leaves.
Yes.
And it looks like maybe a squirrel's nest.
Yes.
But it's green.
Right.
And that is mistletoe.
That's it. It's a parasite, and we kiss under it.
Brent, we have a biologist here who is willing to kiss and tell.
Yes. The mistletoe tradition it dates back to the Druids. They used mistletoe in a variety of ways. It was considered a sacred plant. One of the ways was to make a tea, essentially, a concoction of this stuff, and feed it to human sacrifices who knew they were taking it. They knew they were going to die, but that's how they killed people, to celebrate or to ask for something, things of that nature. So it is a poisonous parasite as well.
It seems like there's an association with love and fertility and romance.
Absolutely, and especially in the spring, but there are a lot of Celtic and other tribal traditions that have to do with fertility rites, and mistletoe was, as a sacred plant, a biggie among a lot of these cultures. Over time has sort of melded into this Christmas kissing thing.
It's not easy to pick. It's way up in the top of trees. How do you get this stuff?
What we used to do, and I don't know if this is a Kentucky thing too, I know it's definitely a Carolina thing, we would go out and lay a sheet or a tarp or something under a tree and take a shotgun or a .22 and fire it up into the tree and break off little branches of the stuff. It'd rain down and you'd see it on your sheet, and you could collect it that way. So that's how people collected it when I was growing up.
A noisy affair.
It is a noisy affair.
Holidays are certainly what we eat, and that will vary from almost state to state, house to house, depending on where you grew up and what your traditions are. But cooking for the holidays, I'm guessing one thing that is traditional, though probably not very, very much liked, is fruitcake.
I actually do like fruitcake in small doses.
I want your autograph before we leave. You are the first I've met in all these many years.
But I think, and I could be wrong about this, Brent, it's just a total theory on my part. I think that the fruitcake might be one of the ways that we sort of absorbed the Yule log.
It's like re-gifting.
Yeah, you could keep them year after year. That's true. Soak them in enough brandy, you can dig them up 100 years from now.
That easily could be part of it. I think part of it, too, is, and this goes back to traditional times when we didn't have the refined sugars and the things that were readily available. So when you had the dried fruits, which were very precious. So I think, Charlie, I think the fruitcakes used to be a very precious and well-regarded thing. And I think that's part of our national, regional family folklore, too, is we all have well, not all of us, but many of us have the story about the person in the family, bless their heart, to use a regional expression, that makes the fruitcake every year. And there's the obligatory, maybe it's the bite that you do, or the piece that you do, or maybe the rest goes in the freezer, or the stories around the fact that not everybody likes it, but we love her or him so much that we will take it and use it for a doorstop.
But these would be native trees, dropping the native fruits and the native nuts.
Yes.
Chestnuts, roasting over open fires. You would automatically think Nat King Cole and American chestnuts, although I don't think there was American chestnuts dropping from the trees in forests like they once were.
No.
That tree, the American chestnut tree, what year was that the blight came through and essentially wiped it out from ever being a tall, majestic tree like it was 150 years ago?
I don't remember the year, but I know that my grandparents remembered chestnut trees. And, so it wasn't all that long ago. And it was, from a wildlife point of view, it was a huge loss. Chestnuts provided tons of mast. Mast is stuff that's hard to chew, basically, to masticate. Nuts and
walnuts.
Walnuts and things of that nature are hard mast. That was a huge food source for a lot of the wildlife.
And that fed
deer. It would have fed squirrels. It would have fed all sorts of nut-eating creatures, basically. Fortunately, we also have oak trees and hickory trees and things of that nature that could substitute in, but the chestnut tree, that was quite a loss to wildlife.
Wildlife, folk life, all a part of Christmas. Our remaining minutes are just ahead after the break. I'm Charlie Baglin, and you are listening to Kentucky Afield Radio. This is Kentucky Afield Radio. My name is Charlie Baglin. We are talking about the wildlife and folklife sides of Christmas. Laurie Davison from the Salado Wildlife Education Center is my guest, along with Brent Bjorkman from Western Kentucky University, the Folklife program.
We have been talking about Christmas as if it were a single day or a Christmas Eve and a day. Christmas seasons. There's the 12 days of Christmas. We hear that song. It's in the Epiphany, I think. What is that, Brent? The 6th of January?
Yeah.
Is that the 12th day?
That's the 12th day of Christmas. I believe that's when the Magi finally got to visit the Christ child. And I do believe that it's the three wise men finally making their approach to make that visit and to celebrate.
That's the lore. So the Christ the child, the little baby, was 12 days old when the kings finally got there to him. Right. Kings didn't get there on Christmas Day.
According to this doctrine, absolutely.
Is there any significance to the first day, the second day of Christmas, the third day? Do those numbers have, are they like a code?
Well, the middle of the 16th century, as I understand it, when the Roman Catholics in England, during the shift to Anglican, were really not permitted to practice their faith as openly. So there became this carol as a song, first as something to say, and then it evolved into a song, and all of you know that. There's the partridge in the pear tree was a secretive way to talk about Christ, and the two turtle doves were the Old and the New Testament. And it goes on, and the 6 geese a laying stood for the 6 days of creation. It was just a way to work around the powers that be of the time.
So you were saying 5 golden rings, but you were meaning something else. You knew with your fingers crossed behind your back.
Yeah.
You meant something else.
Yeah, that's right, the 5 golden rings. I'm talking about the first 5 books of the Old Testament. So it was just a way to be able to be who you were in your religion when it was during a time of persecution.
It is information just like that qualifies us to be under the education category on YouTube.com instead of limited to the normal 10 minutes that everybody else gets. Laurie, I want to hear, you had a story that I think you have done in recent years on a show on this topic about Lapland and the reindeer pulling the sleigh.
Yeah, the reindeer thing, if you think about it, the farther north you go, you see a lot of reindeer. Now, of course, the North Pole, there aren't any.
Those are caribou. And so they do exist. They are real animals.
They're real animals.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Something that's fun to tell kids here about reindeer is that they are the only members of the deer family in which the females also have antlers. The reason for that is that where you find reindeer, you will also find wolves that like to eat them. And
so they do have to fly.
They gotta fly. They've got to be able to defend themselves. That's what it comes down to. Now, among white-tailed deer and deer that you have here in Kentucky, elk and things of that nature, the antlers are great for self-defense. But if that's what they were there for, the females would need them too. What they're actually there for is to show off. It's a way of a male demonstrating his physical prowess, that he is mature, he's of breeding age, and he's got some nice healthy genes. A buck that's unhealthy will not have a nice rack of antlers, and that helps the females select the male that they're going to mate with.
But they actually did pull sleighs or sleds or something in Lapland.
Yeah.
They did. Yeah. And I guess there are no horses or cattle. perhaps, to do it in their place?
Cattle don't do terribly well in snow. I guess I forget how far north muskoxen go, but I guess they could have tried that.
So they really did. That just wasn't something somebody just dreamed up to put in a story.
I think somehow just because reindeer are synonymous with Siberia and Lapland and areas like that, I think they were a more natural fit for pulling Santa's sleigh.
Do you believe that Santa texts and flies his sleigh?
Absolutely not.
Laurie, do you text and drive?
Absolutely not.
Brent Bjorkman with Western Kentucky University, do you text and drive?
Absolutely not.
This has been fun. I'm now in the Christmas mood.
Thanks, Charlie. It was a pleasure.
Enjoyed it.
Well, I would like to take a moment to put in my annual plug for giving back to wildlife and the outdoors as you give unto others. A bird feeder filled with suet, sunflower seeds. Not a bird out there that doesn't appreciate a handout, especially when it's cold. Gifts to wildlife are often gifts to people, and they can include such things as bird houses, bird baths, bird feeders, squirrel feeders, duck boxes, bat boxes, butterfly boxes. And while on the subject of giving critters a place to live, why not give them the whole countryside? You can give one in part by putting a Kentucky Nature license plate on your car, truck, or minivan. And that money goes into a fund and has gone since 1995 to buy and preserve something like 70,000 acres across our state. That's a pretty good gift. Bobcat, butterfly, the cardinal. They say nature's finest on them. Including nature in the gifts we give can also take the form of a fishing license. If they're under 16 and don't need a license, get them one anyway. Make them feel important. For wildlife research and habitat creation and protection, the few dollars you spend on a license benefit wildlife species across the state. Bass, black bear, bald eagles, it helps them all. And lastly, time is a timely gift anytime you give it. You can take the time to share with someone you know, something you know, about the outdoors. Canoeing, camping, hiking, trees, wildflowers, gardening, aquatic life. And the teaching isn't limited to kids. Anyone can learn. So in this time of giving has many meanings. When you include nature in the mix, it has deeper meaning. Sure, traditionally, giving calls for boxes and bows rather than abstract notions like these, and typically we give to benefit people rather than plants and animals. But ultimately, that's what a healthy environment does. It benefits us. There's much we can do to include nature in the gifts we give, and ideas here only scratch the surface. Scratch your head, you'll find some more. We are out of time. I'm Charlie Bagman. I want you to do me this favor. Have yourself a merry, big Christmas. Don't fool around with a little one. May your Christmas tree reach to the sky with lights as bright as stars. May there be caroling so loud you can hear it wherever you are. May the snowflakes beat the earth like a drum. May even tiny reindeer soar. And may Santa Claus bring you all that you want and more. We'll do it again in a week right here on Kentucky Afield Radio.